I used to be friends with Dave Rubin back in the day. I used to call him the Rube. It was my little nickname for him. I remember inviting him to a 9/11 anniversary event, and Dave said, "Sure, I'll come. When is it?" Here's Dave explaining why he left the Young Turks, why he left his job as a liberal commentator for the Young Turks for a more lucrative position as a right-wing commentator for Glenn Beck.
I think the Sam moment that you brought up, I remember, I was working there at the time, and I was having my wake-up call at that moment when I saw that real-time moment. Like, that was all my frustrations with what the left was becoming, because I was working for these guys, and everybody that disagreed with them was a racist and a bigot and a homophobe. And I was like, none of this makes sense. It can't be that we're all so right, us lefties. We're so right about everything, and not only are we so right, but everyone who we disagree with is literally the worst person in the world.
I know Dave finds pronouns to be troublesome, but everyone can't be the worst person. That's not how pronouns work. Not literally. That being said, if I'm expected to have some kind of understanding for my right-wing opponents, all anyone is required to do is to name one policy by the Republican Party that benefits the majority of Americans. That's all anyone has to do. I think they're going to find that task to be quite troublesome because the right doesn't really have any ideology or any morals. They really only care about power for the sake of power at the expense of the people. And the left represents the people.
That moment woke me up, and then you may have seen it. Sam came to the studio.
Oh, yeah.
Did this 3-hour conversation. Sam sits there quietly, calm, nice.
With Cenk, you're saying? Oh,
yeah, and Cenk is sweating, and the papers are flying all over the place, and there's...
Yeah, I saw that debate yesterday. There was no sweating. There were no papers flying. I never thought of Sam Harris as calm, but go on.
A moment, I think it's at moment 19, if people want, minute 19, if people want to see it, where Sam says something about probability theory, and Cenk basically says, I don't believe in it.
That's not what happened. That's why Dave's a little vague there. What happened was Sam Harris said that there's a probability that Jesus is going to return to Earth, and then Cenk said, yeah, there's a probability. It's probably not going to happen.
That's like saying you don't believe in gravity. I mean, it's real whether you believe it or not. It's happening right now.
Like climate change. Climate change is happening right now. Climate change has more in common with gravity than it does with the return of Jesus. Dave doesn't believe in climate change, not anymore. His evidence that climate change isn't real is that old people are buying property in Florida, and if the sea levels are rising, why would people buy houses? Now, how can you argue with that, science? That's a check. It's your move, NASA. Dave also believes in a Putin-esque policy of banning gay representation in media, because positive gay role models will infect, that's his exact word he used, infect children. This in spite of the fact that he's gay, he's married to a guy, and they just adopted 2 kids. Surrogate kids. How will they ever explain the fact that they have children to their children? How's that going to happen? Well, if you were on the left, you would have an easier time tap dancing across a tightrope than jumping through the postmodern hoops it would take to justify a contradiction like that. But Dave doesn't have to do that as a right-wing commentator. He could just ignore it. He could just pretend that it's not happening. And even though the fact that he already announced that it was happening to his audience isn't going to remember. And if anybody brings it up, they'll just say, George Soros, fake news. Dave has found the perfect occupation for Dave Rubin. He has discovered the perfect audience, an audience that is as dumb as Dave Rubin.